She saved a millionaire's life, but he ended up saving her soul. Marry me. Think of it. As a contract. His voice cut through the thunder outside like a blade. Across the dim corner of the rooftop bar, Clara Nguyen froze. Rain drummed against the glass, her reflection trembling beside his. Between them, a single folder lay open, 2 blank signature lines staring back like a dare. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you love cinematic love stories about courage, redemption, and justice, please subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. I love seeing our community from all over the world. Thank you. And now, let us return to our main character. Clara tightened her grip on her tote bag, water dripping from the hem of her thrift store coat. I am sorry. What did you just say? Ethan Ward leaned forward, the golden cufflink on his wrist catching the bar light. His gaze was calm, deliberate, the look of a man used to making impossible offers sound logical. Marry me, he repeated. For 6 months, you will be compensated, and I will keep my company. Her laugh came out broken, half disbelief, half exhaustion. Is this some kind of joke? He did not blink. My father's will requires a spouse to secure my position as CEO. The board is circling like vultures. I need a name on paper. You need a second chance. Clara felt the words slam into her chest. A second chance. The phrase echoed like a memory she had buried under unpaid bills and eviction warnings. Just 3 hours ago, she had been fired from the very hotel owned by the man now sitting across from her. His investors had made a scene, left without paying, and she had been blamed for it. Now the same man was offering her a deal that sounded like madness, or maybe mercy. I do not even know you, she whispered. You do not have to, Ethan said, sliding the folder toward her. You just have to sign. The rain outside turned into a downpour. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and gray behind her. For a moment, Clara thought about her mother's hospital bill tucked inside her purse, about the letter from the landlord taped to her door, about the exhaustion that had turned hope into a luxury. She looked at the man in front of her, the sharp lines of his face, the steady patience in his tone, and that faint, almost human trace of loneliness behind his composure. What is in it for you? She asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. Control, he said simply. Over my company, my narrative, my life. She stared down at the folder again. A marriage license, a prenuptial agreement, payment terms. Clause after clause that looked clinical, bloodless yet somehow heavier than any vow she had ever heard. Her fingers hovered above the pen. You could have anyone, she murmured. Anyone, he agreed. But not someone who owes me nothing. Lightning flashed across the skyline, bleaching the room white for a split second. When the light faded, Clara's hand was trembling. She reached for the pen. 6 months, she said. No promises, no feelings. Ethan's lips curved, not quite a smile. Exactly. She signed. The ink bled slightly under the rain mist. When she lifted her eyes, Ethan had already taken the pen, his signature fast, practiced, final. He extended his hand. Welcome to the contract, Mrs. Ward. Clara swallowed hard, shook his hand, and whispered the only truth she had left. This is insane. Ethan looked at her with that same unreadable calm. Maybe, he said, but sometimes the only way to regain control is to surrender it first. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline as 2 strangers sealed a deal that neither of them realized would destroy the walls they had built around their hearts. The courthouse smelled faintly of rain and paper. 1 week after that night on the rooftop, Clara Nguyen stood under the tall marble columns, her hands clutching a small bouquet of white lilies that were not hers. The clerk's voice echoed through the narrow hall. Do you, Ethan Ward, take this woman? Ethan's answer came calm and certain. I do. When it was her turn, Clara's voice barely made a sound. I do. No family, no friends. Just the steady scratching of the notary's pen and the hollow click of her new last name being sealed into record. Outside, the drizzle had turned into sunlight, as if the sky itself could not decide whether to mourn or bless what had just happened. Ethan opened the door for her as if they were business partners finishing a deal. A car will take you to the estate, he said quietly. Dinner is at 7. She nodded, too numb to answer. The black sedan glided through the city, past the shops where she used to stop for coffee after double shifts, past the bus stop where she had once waited in the cold. The world moved the same, only she had changed names. The Ward estate rose like something from another century. Iron gates swung open, revealing a mansion of pale stone, tall windows and quiet fountains. The silence there was not peace. It was the kind that pressed on the chest, reminding her she did not belong. Inside, a housekeeper guided her up a grand staircase. "Your room, Mrs. Ward." The words landed strangely. The room was beautiful, too beautiful. A king-size bed dressed in white, a balcony that overlooked gardens, and a closet filled with dresses she had never seen. On the desk, a note in Ethan's handwriting. "Welcome. Dinner at 7. Formal attire preferred." The handwriting was clean, deliberate, like the man himself. No warmth, only precision. At 7 sharp, she descended the staircase in a navy dress that fit perfectly, which somehow made her feel more misplaced. The dining room stretched the length of her entire apartment. A single candle burned at the center of the table. Ethan sat at the far end, a glass of red wine in his hand. "You look presentable," he said evenly, not unkindly, just factual. "Thank you," she replied, forcing composure. Servants moved quietly, setting dishes she could not name. Clara barely tasted any of it. The sound of the clock ticking above the fireplace became the loudest thing in the room. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her. "You will have access to every wing except the West study. You will attend 3 events next week. I will have the schedule sent to your room." She set down her fork. "You do not have to treat me like an employee." He paused, then leaned back slightly. "This arrangement works only if we respect boundaries." "Boundaries," she repeated. "Right." The air between them tightened. It was strange how 2 people could share a table and still feel continents apart. After dinner, Ethan walked her to the grand staircase. The house lights glowed soft gold. For the first time, his voice gentled. "You handled yourself well today. My mother used to say calm is a form of power." Clara met his gaze. "Your mother must have been kind." He looked away toward the portrait above the piano. "She was," he said quietly, "until this house took it from her." The silence that followed was heavy enough to end the conversation. He nodded once. "Good night, Mrs. Ward." When she reached her room, Clara closed the door and leaned against it, the weight of the day crashing over her. She pulled the lilies from the table, laid them on the windowsill, and whispered to herself, "This is just a contract." 6 months. Downstairs. Ethan stood by the piano, his reflection caught in the glass of the framed portrait. The candlelight flickered across his face, softening the edges that business had carved into stone. He looked up, toward the ceiling, toward the room where his new wife was probably trying not to cry, and said under his breath, 6 months. 2 voices, the same words, spoken in different rooms, unaware that somewhere between duty and distance, something real had already begun. The following morning began with the quiet hum of the mansion coming to life. Clara Nguyen woke to the scent of polished wood and sunlight sneaking through the sheer curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then her eyes landed on the wedding ring resting on the nightstand, thin and gold, shining like a reminder. Downstairs, the housekeeper greeted her with a soft nod. "Mr. Ward is in the study," she said. "He asked that you join him for breakfast." Clara hesitated but followed. The West study, the one room he had forbidden, was closed. Instead, he waited in the East parlor, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, reading the financial section of the paper. The table between them held black coffee, eggs, and toast that looked untouched. Ethan looked up as she entered. "Good morning, Mrs. Ward." Her reply came out polite, practiced. "Good morning." He folded the paper neatly. "Today, I would like to outline our public schedule." He slid a folder toward her. 3 charity events, 1 shareholders' dinner, and a weekend retreat in Vermont. You will be by my side at each. Our marriage must appear authentic. Clara glanced at the list, her throat dry. "And what do I say when people ask how we met?" His eyes lifted from the cup. "Tell them the truth." he said. That I made you an offer, and you said yes. Her laugh came sharp and humorless. That would certainly sound romantic, he almost smiled. Sometimes honesty is the best disguise. As the days unfolded, the routine settled in like clockwork. A stylist arrived with gowns tailored to her frame. A publicist coached her on posture, eye contact, and small talk. Smile, but not too wide, the woman said. People believe what looks effortless. Clara practiced in the mirror, learning how to hold a champagne glass as if it were part of her hand. But when the house went quiet at night, she returned to her small sketchbook hidden in a drawer. The pencil lines were her escape sketches of the garden, the piano, the look on Ethan's face when he thought no one was watching. One evening, she found him in that same parlor, sleeves rolled up, studying reports spread across the table. The firelight caught the edges of his hair. He looked less like a man of power and more like someone lost in numbers that no longer mattered. "You work late," she said softly. He did not look up. Work does not argue. It does not leave. Something in his tone made her step closer. "Is that what you think marriage is? An argument waiting to happen?" He finally met her eyes. "Marriage is a contract, Clara. People forget that when they start believing in promises." Her voice steadied. "And you? Do you believe in anything?" He paused, the question lingering between them. "I used to," he said. "Before this house taught me that loyalty can be bought." She wanted to ask what that meant, but his expression closed again like a door. The following week brought their first public event, a fundraiser for the Ward Foundation. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, strings playing softly above the crowd. As they stepped inside, cameras flashed. Ethan's hand brushed hers, firm but steady, a silent signal. "Hold your head high." Reporters swarmed. "Mrs. Ward, how does it feel to marry the most eligible bachelor in the city?" Clara smiled the way she had practiced. "It feels surprising." A laugh rippled through the press line. Ethan glanced at her, the faintest amusement in his eyes. "You handled that well," he murmured as they moved forward. For the first time, she caught herself smiling back, not the trained smile, but something smaller and real. Later that night, back in the mansion, she removed the diamond earrings and placed them on the dresser. Her reflection stared back, half dream, half lie. She whispered to the empty room, "This was supposed to be simple." Across the hall, Ethan stood on his balcony, the city glittering below like a map of choices. He turned the wedding ring on his finger, remembering how her voice had sounded when she said, "I do." Maybe this arrangement would work. Maybe feelings were just another luxury neither of them could afford. But somewhere deep down, he already knew contracts end. Hearts do not always follow the terms. By the second month, Clara Nguyen had learned how to move through the Ward estate as if she belonged there. Every morning, she crossed the marble foyer, greeted the staff, and studied the schedule Ethan left on the table. Their life had rhythm measured, polite, and painfully quiet. Yet beneath that surface calm, something unspoken kept shifting. Ethan Ward had begun to notice details he was not supposed to. How her laughter sounded when she talked to the gardener about the lilies. How she tied her hair into a loose knot when she sketched by the balcony. How she avoided mirrors when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, he passed the open door to her studio room and saw the drawings pinned to the wall. Not landscapes, not gowns, portraits of faces. His face, in different shades of charcoal, all serious, all human. He paused. "You draw?" Clara turned, startled, the pencil slipping from her hand. "It is nothing. Just practice." Ethan stepped closer. "It does not look like nothing." She hesitated, unsure if he was mocking her. "I used to paint, before life got in the way. Maybe it is time to let life get out of the way," he said quietly, then left before she could respond. That night, for the first time, he stayed home instead of working late. They shared dinner without reporters, or flashing lights. Between them, the silence softened. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. "Why marry someone you barely know?" Ethan took a breath. "My father's will stated that a married heir would retain control of Ward Capital. It was his way of forcing me to value family, even if it meant faking one." I thought if I followed his rule, I could prove him wrong. Clara's eyes softened. And have you? He met her gaze. Not yet. The following weekend, they attended a charity gala together. The ballroom gleamed with chandeliers, polished laughter echoing through the air. Ethan stood tall, composed as ever, while Clara navigated through strangers who measured her with quiet judgment. When one socialite whispered, "She was a waitress, you know," Clara felt heat crawl up her neck. Ethan turned sharply. "That waitress is my wife," he said loud enough for the table to hear. The woman's smile vanished. Later, outside on the terrace, Clara breathed in the cool night air. "You did not have to defend me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes, I did." The city lights flickered below, wind rustling her hair. "It is strange," she said softly. "I agreed to this to survive, but sometimes I forget it is not real." He studied her for a long moment. What if it could be? She looked away before answering. "Do not ask questions you do not want answered." The next morning, Clara woke to find a small box on her desk. Inside was a set of professional paints, untouched, each label in gold print. A note in Ethan's handwriting read, "For when life stops getting in the way." She smiled, tracing the words with her fingertips. Days later, the warmth between them deepened quietly. They shared coffee instead of contracts. He began joining her on morning walks through the garden. Sometimes they spoke of nothing, sometimes of everything. He told her about his mother, a pianist who had died too early, and how his father had remarried for business, not love. She told him about her mother's small cafe in Queens, where dreams had been served alongside soup. Then, one evening, a knock shattered the calm. The butler handed Ethan a thin envelope, marked private and urgent. Inside was a tabloid clipping photos of Clara at the gala, circled in red ink, and a headline that read, "The Waitress Bride, a Fortune in Disguise." Ethan's face hardened. "Who sent this?" The butler hesitated. "Miss Victoria Lang, sir." Clara's stomach dropped. She had heard the name Ethan's former fiancée, now one of his corporate advisors. Ethan folded the paper with precise control, but his voice carried steel. "This ends now." He walked out, leaving Clara alone in the grand hallway, the soft echo of his footsteps fading into the marble. Upstairs, she looked at the box of paints on her desk and whispered, "It was never meant to be simple." Outside, thunder rolled across the city again, the same sound that had started it all, reminding her that even the most carefully written contracts could not protect a heart once it began to feel. Rain fell again that night, steady and relentless, drumming against the glass walls of the ward penthouse. Clara Nguyen sat in the corner of the library, the untouched box of paints beside her. Downstairs, raised voices echoed through the marble hall's Ethan Ward, arguing with someone over the phone. "Do not call me again, Victoria," he said sharply. "You made your choice when you sent that article." The call ended with a slam. When he appeared in the doorway moments later, the exhaustion in his eyes was sharper than any anger. "I am sorry you had to see that headline," he said. "It was meant to humiliate both of us." Clara closed her sketchbook. "You do not have to protect me." "I am not protecting you," Ethan replied quietly. "I am protecting what we built." She stared at him. "What we built? It is a contract." "Ethan," his voice lowered. "Then why does it hurt to see them drag your name through the mud?" She could not answer. The truth pressed hard against her ribs. The fake marriage had started to feel less like a performance and more like the only part of her life that made sense. Over the next few days, the scandal grew online. Photos of her at the gala flooded social media, twisting facts into ridicule. "Gold digger," one headline said. "A waitress who fooled the elite." The comments cut deeper than she expected. Each time her phone buzzed, she turned it face down. Ethan ordered his publicist to issue a statement denying the accusations, but the press did not care about the truth. They cared about drama. They wanted a villain, and Clara was the easiest target. One afternoon, she overheard two assistants whispering in the corridor. "The board is pressuring him," one said. "If he does not dissolve the marriage, the investors will vote to remove him." Clara froze. Her chest tightened as she realized the cost of his loyalty. That night, she found him standing on the balcony, staring at the storm over the skyline. "You should let them do it," she said softly. "End the contract. Save your company." He turned slowly. "Is that what you want?" "It is what makes sense." He shook his head. "You always think love and logic belong in the same sentence." "This is not love," she insisted. "Then why are you crying?" Her breath caught. She had not realized the tears had already started. "I cannot be the reason you lose everything," she said. He stepped closer, his voice steady but raw. "You are the reason I remember why it is worth having anything at all." The next morning, the newspapers printed another blow rumors of Ethan's resignation and an emergency shareholder meeting scheduled within the week. The mansion filled with silence that felt like the pause before a verdict. Clara packed her things. When Ethan came home late that evening, he found her suitcase by the door. "Running away fixes nothing," he said. "I am not running," she replied. "I am freeing you from this." Ethan's expression did not change, but his eyes did. "Clara, you do not free someone by leaving them to fight alone." Her hand shook as she picked up the suitcase handle. "Goodbye, Ethan." He watched her walk toward the elevator, the sound of her heels echoing through the marble foyer. The doors closed, taking her reflection with them. For the first time since his father's death, Ethan Ward felt the stillness of a house that finally looked as empty as it always felt. Hours later, in her small apartment downtown, Clara unpacked the box of paints. The note inside was still there, for when life stops getting in the way. She pressed her fingers against the words and whispered, "Maybe it never does." Outside, the rain eased into silence. Inside the Ward mansion, Ethan stood alone before the grand piano, the sound of her absence louder than any storm. He placed a hand over the cold keys and said to no one, 6 months were supposed to be enough, but both of them already knew nothing written in ink could erase what had been written between them. If this fake marriage universe pulls you in, subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter. The city looked different when you were heartbroken. The colors seemed muted, and the noise of traffic no longer felt alive, only distant. For Clara Nguyen, the rhythm of New York had lost its heartbeat. She had returned to her small apartment above the bakery where she used to work part-time. The ceiling leaked, the walls smelled faintly of paint thinner, and the mattress sank in the middle, but at least it was hers. Days passed quietly. She spent her mornings sketching and her nights watching the news, always lowering the volume when Ethan Ward's name appeared on the screen. The coverage of his company's crisis, continued rumors of boardroom betrayal, insider manipulation, and threats to strip him of his position. Clara tried to convince herself that walking away had been right, that her absence might protect him. But each headline felt like a bruise she could not hide. One evening, as she washed brushes in the sink, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She ignored it once, but it rang again. Finally, she answered. "Mrs. Ward?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, male, formal. "This is Daniel Cross from Ward Capital's legal department. I apologize for calling, but Mr. Ward has been suspended pending investigation. We believe someone inside the company falsified documents. He refused to cooperate with the press, and well, he mentioned your name in his defense." Clara's hand tightened around the phone. "He what?" "He said you are the only person who knows the truth about the night of the gala, about the file exchange. Victoria Lang orchestrated. The board will meet tomorrow morning." "If you could come forward," she interrupted, voice trembling. "He never told me about any file." "That is why he needs you," Daniel said softly. "Miss Lang presented a forged document suggesting your marriage was a financial fraud. Ethan refused to deny it. He said he would not defend himself by destroying your name." When the call ended, Clara stood still for a long time. Then she looked at the box of paints again, the note that said, "For when life stops getting in the way." It was time, she realized, to stop letting fear decide for her. The next morning, she walked into Ward Capital's headquarters for the first time since the wedding. Reporters swarmed outside, shouting questions. "Mrs. Ward, is it true your marriage was fake? Did you take money from the company?" She kept walking, her chin lifted. Inside, the boardroom felt colder than she expected. Dozens of executives sat behind glass tables. Ethan stood near the center, his suit immaculate but his face pale from sleepless nights. When he saw her, the mask he had worn for months cracked. "Clara," he breathed, barely audible. She turned to the chairman. "You have all read lies about me," she began. "But if you want to talk about fraud, maybe start with the file Miss Lang planted." Murmurs rippled across the room. Clara reached into her purse and placed a USB drive on the table. "This contains the real footage from that night. Security cameras do not lie." She tried to make it look like Ethan paid me for the marriage, but the timestamps prove she fabricated everything. The chairman nodded to an assistant, who connected the drive. On the large screen, the video played Victoria Lang entering the press area, slipping an envelope to a journalist, then deleting data from the server room. The evidence was undeniable. Victoria's face turned white. She tried to speak, but security was already moving toward her. Ethan looked at Clara, his voice low. "You did not have to come." "Yes," she said, steady now. "I did." The meeting ended with applause from a few stunned board members, but Clara barely heard it. She turned to leave, yet Ethan caught her wrist. "You walked away once," he said. "Do not do it again." Clara met his eyes. "Then do not give me a reason to." Outside, the flash of cameras exploded, but this time she did not flinch. The world had called their marriage fake, but she knew better now. Sometimes the most real things begin as lies you are forced to live. 2 new millionaire stories every day. Subscribe now to stay with this universe. The fallout from the board meeting was immediate. Within hours, financial news outlets ran headlines declaring Ethan Ward cleared of all charges. Victoria Lang had been arrested for corporate fraud and obstruction. The empire Ethan had spent a decade protecting was finally safe. Yet in the quiet of that victory, he felt only exhaustion and the echo of Clara Nguyen's voice when she said, "Then do not give me a reason to." That evening, the Ward estate no longer felt cold. Reporters crowded the gates, but inside, the rooms glowed softly under the rain. Ethan sat by the piano, untouched since his mother's death. His hand hovered over the keys, hesitant, then pressed one note. The sound wavered through the hall like a confession he could not speak aloud. When the door opened, he thought it was his imagination. But Clara stood there, rain clinging to her hair, eyes steady. "I came to get the rest of my things," she said. "You could have sent someone," he replied. "I needed to see for myself that you were all right." Ethan rose slowly. "I am not. Not until I say what I should have said months ago." She exhaled, her voice quiet. "Ethan, you do not have to explain." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "I built everything in my life to prove I could not be controlled. But the truth is, I have never felt more free than when I was with you. You were supposed to be a condition in a contract. Instead, you became the exception to every rule." Silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Clara looked down at the gold ring still on her finger. "When I signed that paper, I promised 6 months. Nothing more. But somewhere along the way, I started wishing time would stop." Ethan stepped closer. "Then let us stop pretending we are counting." Her breath trembled. "What if this is another mistake?" He smiled faintly. "Then it will be the best one I ever made." Outside, the thunder softened to rain, the sound gentle now, almost forgiving. Clara's eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time since their wedding day, she did not see the CEO who had bought her silence. She saw the man who had earned her trust. They stood there for a long moment, the contract between them forgotten, the distance erased. In that quiet room, love no longer asked for permission. It simply existed. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. Light spilled across the Ward estate, washing away the grayness that had clung to it for so long. Clara Nguyen woke early, standing by the tall windows, watching the garden shimmer after the storm. For the first time, she did not feel like a guest. Downstairs, Ethan Ward was already waiting in the dining room, suit pressed, eyes clear. "There is a press conference today," he said as she entered. The board wants me to make a statement about the company's future. Clara hesitated. Do you want me to stay out of it? Ethan shook his head. No, I want you there, beside me. The truth deserves witnesses. Later that morning, the headquarters of Ward Capital was filled with flashing cameras and restless reporters. Ethan stepped onto the stage, Clara by his side. The room hushed instantly. He looked straight into the sea of lights, his voice firm but calm. Months ago, I made a decision that blurred the line between business and heart. I entered a marriage that began as a contract. But every rule written in ink was broken by something stronger: integrity. He glanced toward Clara, then continued, You cannot fake honor, and you cannot measure love in clauses. The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled frantically, but Ethan did not stop. To those who believed the lies, I forgive you. To those who helped spread them, I invite you to look again, because this woman beside me stood up for the truth when I could not. A wave of applause rippled through the room. Clara felt her throat tighten. For the first time, he had spoken her name not as an obligation, but as a declaration. After the conference, Ethan led her to the rooftop of the building. The city stretched below, sunlight bouncing off the glass towers. He turned to her, holding a small velvet box. I once told you that our marriage would last 6 months, he said, but I no longer want an expiration date. You saved my name, Clara, and you gave me back my soul. So I am asking you again, without contracts, without conditions, will you stay? Clara opened the box. Inside was not a diamond, but the same simple gold band she had signed her name to months ago. Her eyes filled with tears. It was never about the ring, she whispered. It was about the choice. Ethan smiled softly. Then choose me again, she nodded. Always. The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of applause from below. This time, it was not for the CEO or the scandal. It was for 2 people who had turned a lie into something true, and a contract into a promise. Spring came quietly to New York that year. The Ward estate, once a fortress of silence, now carried the sound of laughter echoing through its halls. In the garden, the lilies Clara Nguyen had planted bloomed in soft white rows, their petals open toward the morning light. Ethan Ward stood by the porch, sleeves rolled up, watching her kneel among the flowers. You do realize, he said, smiling faintly, that these gardens have not looked this alive in years. Clara brushed the dirt from her hands. That is because they were not growing for anyone before. He stepped closer, slipping an arm gently around her shoulders. They are growing for you now. It had been 3 months since the press conference. 3 months since the world learned the truth. The tabloids had moved on. The headlines had changed. But for Ethan and Clara, the story was still unfolding quietly, authentically. They had chosen not to remarry publicly. Instead, one afternoon, in a small chapel tucked between 2 oak trees on the estate, they renewed their vows with only the house staff and a few close friends present. There were no cameras, no business deals, no contracts, just sunlight through stained glass and the sound of her voice saying, yes, again. Ethan placed the same gold ring on her finger, the one that had once symbolized obligation and now stood for choice. No clauses, he whispered. No conditions. Just you, she replied. Afterward, they walked hand in hand through the garden. The air smelled of wet soil and lilacs. Do you ever think about how strange it was? Clara asked. A contract brought us together. Ethan laughed softly. It was not strange. It was fate pretending to be paperwork. She smiled at that, resting her head on his shoulder. So what happens now? He looked toward the horizon, where the city skyline shimmered in the distance. Now we live. Now we build something real, without fear of losing it. That evening, they hosted a small dinner for the employees who had stood by them. Clara presented her first art collection, a series of paintings called The Lines Between Us, inspired by the journey from pretense to truth. The first painting was of a single folded contract torn in half, with a golden thread holding the 2 pieces together. When she unveiled it, Ethan said quietly, That is what love is, Clara. It does not erase the past, it stitches it back together. The guests applauded, But for Clara, the only sound that mattered was Ethan's heartbeat when he drew her close for the dance. The music was soft, the lights low, and for the first time, there was no need to pretend. As they swayed beneath the chandelier, she looked up at him and whispered, "We were supposed to end in 6 months." He smiled. "Then let us be late forever." Outside, the city lights flickered like stars, and the rain that had once separated them now glistened on the windows as a quiet blessing. If you want more untold billionaire love, subscribe and choose your next chapter on screen.